Okay, you're on.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Senate Education on Tuesday, January 30th at 1:30. We're going to spend the next hour. We have a couple of bills that we're hoping to make our way through in the coming days, having to do with, I generally labeled them boards and commissions. So we're looking at bills, we're looking at the State Board of Education, we're looking at to understand today, not to really take people's positions, but just understand some of the boards we have out there as it relates to UVM, the state colleges. And so I asked Ms. Koenig to come in and just tell us a little bit, and then we'll have Ms. Scott give us some background on the UVM board, how it works, who's on it, what you like, what you don't like. Thanks, Ms. Koenig.
Absolutely. So the UVM board is a pretty large board. It's composed of 25
Can
members.
we ask you to state your name?
Sure, I'm Wendy Koenig. I'm the executive director of
Lose my job
government relations for the University of Vermont.
Thank you.
Our board of trustees is made up of 25 members, 9 of whom are elected by the legislature, by the General Assembly. 9 are self-perpetuating members. 3 members are appointed by the governor, and 2 student members are elected by the student body.
So 9 legislative trustees, 9 self-perpetuating, 3 appointed by the governor, and 2 student members.
And then president of the university and the governor serve as ex officio members. So that adds up to 25. The board is number one. I will tell you that having legislatively elected members is very unusual. We are the only state in the nation that does that.
Did not know that.
There are many states who have gubernatorial appointees, but no other states do legislatively elected members. All of the members of the board serve 6-year terms, but for students who serve 2-year terms. So in odd years, we have 3 legislative trustees elected by this body. In even years, we have 3 new self-perpetuating members who come on. And there's 1 new student who comes on every year. The board is divided up into some separate parts, and then I'll talk about committees. But the UVM board consists of the self-perpetuating members. Their job is to elect new members of their own body. They also have there's a specific scholarship fund that's privately endowed that they also run. They oversee the investments there. The legislative trustees are put together in a part of the board that's called the Vermont Agricultural Board. That's the public members of the board. And when they are all together, it's called the full board. Most of our board meetings consist of the full board. The UVM board and the agricultural board meet for an hour each, separately. We also have a board.
So the UVM board and the Vermont Ag board meet separately for an hour. No.
Yeah. So the full board goes together.
Yeah.
Most of the work is done together.
Okay.
When we do a board meeting, we have 3 board meetings a year. During that period of time, what we call the private board, the UVM board meets themselves for an hour, and the Vermont Agricultural Board meets themselves for an hour. The rest of the time is together.
Could you just say something about that, why, and help us to understand?
Sure. So the UVM board meets to oversee that scholarship fund, and then they also elect new members. The Vermont Agricultural Board meets to talk about issues related to the legislature, to anything that's going on in terms of public engagement between the university and the state.
So it's not as though it's something like that's in statute, it's just the way that you.
No, it's just the way that it's set up. I will tell you that we have a number of committees that exist within the board.
Before you go there, Senator Gillick, did you have your hand up?
I can read.
You sure? Okay, please.
So I'll tell you about the standing committees that we have. We have an audit committee, we have a board governance committee, a budget, finance, and investment committee, educational policy and institutional resources committee, the executive committee, the UVM board and the Vermont Agricultural Board. So those are the different standing committees. We do have some advisory committees and subcommittees. For example, one that is called the Ad Hoc Labor Advisory Group, the Ad Hoc Presidential Comprehensive Review Committee, the Annual Review Subcommittee, the Board Governance Work Group, the Investment Subcommittee, and the Multi-Purpose Center Work Group. And some of those, as issues are resolved, can be retired. For example, the Multi-Purpose Center Work Group, once we are finished building the Multi-Purpose Center, will no longer exist.
And again, just to be clear, that's all in your decision-making authority as a board.
Yeah.
We're really the appointment.
Yes.
Okay.
I would like to mention that on all of our standing committees, we have members of the board that are assigned to different committees. But we also have members of staff and faculty that serve on each of those board committees. They are non-voting members, but they are fully engaged with the work of each of those committees.
So again, just to verify,
Yep.
sorry, faculty and staff are on all of the committees.
Yep.
Okay. One each kind of thing or as needed?
No, I believe that there are multiple
Okay.
on each, and what happens is that they participate in all of those committee meetings, discussions, etc. We have asked them in recent years to report back to their constituency group. So if you are a faculty member who sits on a board committee, we ask that you may share notes or observations that you have with the rest of the faculty, and same for staff. I should also point out that the board is not the only place where we have governance for faculty and staff. We have a faculty senate at the university and what we call staff council, which is a group of staff that meet to talk about staff issues and concerns. I think that everyone is also aware of the fact that we have a faculty union and we now have a staff union at the university as well.
Do you mind saying something about the faculty senate? So we know this is all faculty members automatically part of it.
No, they're elected by their own ranks.
Okay.
And they are tasked with governing over issues related to programs, academic issues. So for example, if we wanted to start a new major or minor, it would have to be approved by the faculty senate. All issues of faculty governance run through the senate.
Thank you.
So that's the overview. I will say that I will read to you a little piece about what the board's work is. The University of Vermont Board of Trustees has full legal responsibility and authority for the University of Vermont, including the management and control of property, the setting and approval of policies, budgets, and strategic planning, and the appointment of the president. So that's sort of the overview of what their purview is in terms of what they are in charge of. I will say that we've had a lot of discussions in this committee and elsewhere in this building about what their job is not, and the job of managing the day-to-day affairs of the university is that of the president and his cabinet. The board does not manage the day-to-day activities at the university, but rather oversee with fiduciary duties the strength and financial health of the institution over time. Any questions?
Any questions? Senator Buick?
I'm still trying to, I think I missed something while I was taking notes. So there are 25 members of the board. And is the public board just self-perpetuating?
No,
9, the public board is all 25.
the Vermont Agricultural Board is 9 members. The UVM board is 9 self-perpetuating members. And then there's 3 gubernatorial appointees, 2 students, and the president of the university and the governor as ex officio members.
Great, okay, and you had said that there's no other board in the country that has the legislature vote for members. Are there any boards where the legislature appoints members outside of the legislature?
Not that we have found
Okay.
in research about this, there's many states that have gubernatorial appointees, but not legislatively elected members.
So, I mean, but there's a difference between legislatively elected, legislatively.
Not even legislatively appointed.
We say something about term limits for any and all.
So as I said, members serve 6-year terms.
Okay.
If you,
Including the self-perpetuating.
yes,
Great.
the only people that don't serve 6-year terms are students because they're not with us for that period. You can serve a term and then you can be reelected for a second term, but after that, you are term limited out.
Okay. Can you come back after 6 years?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah,
Can you come back after 1 year off?
I think theoretically, yes.
Theoretically, you could.
Yeah.
Okay. Dan, would you mind saying something about the executive committee, how that works? Who's on it?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can look.
But there is an executive committee that,
There is an executive committee. Well, if I can tell you this. So the executive committee has the same authority as the board in regards to the management of the university's property and affairs, except as may otherwise be provided by law or the university bylaws. The executive committee's membership is comprised of committee chairs and other trustees as appointed by the board chair. The presidents of the UVM Foundation, Faculty Senate, Staff Council, Graduate Student Senate, and Student Government Association serve as non-voting representatives.
yeah,
There are requirements since the university sits in Burlington and maybe a little bit of South Burlington that a member or some of the members be Burlington residents.
in their office, I mean, we have an office in Bennington
Right.
also, and I don't know if there's spaces, but yeah, no, it's a good question. For the mayor or something like that.
No, it's not a requirement.
Good.
I will tell you that right now, one of the legislative trustees is Carol Odie, who is a Burlington resident.
Okay, yeah. Anything else from this? Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
if you have other questions later, you know how to contact me.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Scott. Great to see you.
Nice to see you as well.
And although the state colleges are mentioned in some of the bills we have, we know that we didn't ask you here for an opinion on the bills. We're just trying to understand a little background. We will have, if it's the committee's wish to pursue the bills, we'll have the chancellor back in when she is correct.
Excellent.
Great.
That would be great.
Yeah.
So, good afternoon. For the record, my name is Sharon Scott. I'm the Chief Financial and Operating Officer of the Vermont State Colleges. Chancellor Mouth apologizes for not being able to be here. She is actually out of state right now, but I know she wishes she was here.
People always say that about that.
I know, but as the person with the greatest longevity
By the nickel.
in the system.
There you are.
I was elected to join you today, and to talk with you about the background on our board composition and our structure. And I really am actually excited to be here because I usually only get to be here to talk to you about budget. So
Right.
tonight, I have something else to talk about. So our board is comprised, it's quite a bit smaller than the universities. It is 15 members, total, of which the first is the governor, who serves in an ex officio capacity. There are 5 gubernatorial appointees, and these appointees, we view as offering a direct tie to the administration. There is 1 student trustee who is elected by the Vermont State Colleges Student Association, and that trustee serves for a single-year term and can be elected to a second year if their student body chooses to do so.
So they're elected by the student.
They are elected by the student body. There are also 4 members of the General Assembly that are elected by the body as a whole. And they offer a direct tie for us to the General Assembly, and we view that as a very important relationship moving forward. And then lastly, we have 4 trustees that are elected by the board. We would view them as self-perpetuating, just 4. And we view them as being able to fill in the gaps that we may have in skills or knowledge, abilities that come to us from the gubernatorial appointees and legislative appointed or elected trustees. All of the trustees, with the exception of the student trustee and the governor, are elected to 4-year terms. And they are fiduciaries of the entire system. So they are really, according to our handbook, each individual trustee is a trustee of the entire system, regardless of their source of appointment. And they are expected to act on behalf of the system as a whole and not for the benefit of any particular institution, program, or special interest.
So are those appointed? Is there a functional area that you're looking for to fill it, or can that vary?
It can vary. So sometimes it is about us trying to balance it out, since we are in every corner of the state. We try to balance out, trying to make sure that we have trustees that are located as much as possible in all areas of the state. So it could be that we need someone from Rutland County, and that we might hope that board elected or board appointed trustee would be someone that comes from a specific county. It could be that we're looking for someone with finance experience, or marketing, enrollment experience, et cetera. So we look at the composition of who our board members are from the various quarters that we have, and really try and seek for what that looks like. And that helps us make sure that the board is as well skilled as it possibly can be. The full board itself meets, according to our bylaws, a minimum of 4 times a year. Prior to 2020, it was just about 4 times a year. Right now, they're meeting 6 to 7 times per year. Most of those meetings are held virtually, but we do have several in-person meetings a year. And we try to hold at least 2 of them on one of our college campus locations so that they have an opportunity to be in person. 2 summers ago, that meeting was held at Castleton. This fall, the meeting was held in Montpelier. And we've also recently held a meeting in Johnson. But in general, we try to make sure that we balance this around the state if we can, to give the board real insight into the colleges themselves. There are 6 standing committees of the Board of Trustees. The 2 key ones are education, personnel, and student life. And it is what it says in the label. It is about academics, and so the academic programs, and the students and our employees, and then finance and facilities. And finance and facilities, that particular committee has a real strong emphasis on financial affairs, including budgets and investments. Every board member belongs to one of those 2 committees. So we have a maximum of 7 board members on each committee. There are 7 committee members assigned to each of those 2. And that helps us make sure that we have a broad understanding of the 2 most critical actions that go on in the colleges: our academics and our employees and our students, and also our financial affairs. Our other committees are audit and risk management, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have a nominating committee that only meets a couple of times a year when we have new individuals that we need to consider for self-perpetuating members or the election of officers for the Board of Trustees. And then we have an executive committee, and that executive committee is comprised of the officers of the board. So the board chair, vice chair, secretary, and treasurer. They meet on an ad hoc basis, so generally once every 6 weeks or so. All trustees are invited to all meetings. So we try to make sure that they all receive the invitation. It is challenging. They all have very busy lives, but we have very heavy participation. According to our policies, the board really does limit its direct action to the development and oversight of policy and finances. They are also responsible for the hiring and evaluation of the executive officers, so that's the chancellor and the two presidents. They do not directly manage the institutions. That responsibility rests solely with the chancellor, and the presidents will report directly to the chancellor. As a board itself, they are expected to express their views and seek changes within the committees and other structures, so there can also be subcommittees rather than outside the board process. So they are really expected to be working as a group where that is open and transparent, and individuals have the opportunity to be able to interact with them. And that does mean that the critical work of our board really happens in the committees themselves. Because it's the committees where the real discussion is happening one-on-one, and that's why we want to make sure that board members are invited to every committee meeting and every full board meeting, so that we are making sure that there's no data speaking out. Since early 2020, the Vermont State Colleges have really increased the openness and transparency of the board of trustees processes through the expanded use of virtual meetings and the implementation of best practices that we have really gleaned from working with other institutions, but also with some national organizations. So a few of these changes that we've implemented is that nearly all of our committee meetings are now virtually. This has not only increased board participation, but it's also dramatically increased the access to these meetings for our faculty and staff. Previously, all committee meetings were held in Montpelier, which meant during the day, which meant that very little participation could actually occur. And the only interaction that most faculty and staff or alums or community members could have would be through reading the minutes of the meeting, which isn't necessarily satisfactory. The virtual meetings, though, are live streamed to YouTube, and so they are immediately available for access. We also have Zoom access for public comment, and they also can play back those meetings in YouTube through the next meeting. So until the next meeting's minutes are approved, those meetings are available on YouTube. We also moved our public comment to the front of the meeting. So previously, public comment was at the end of the meeting after all of the decisions were made. And what we really learned that as a best practice, by moving public comment to the very beginning of the meeting, it allows our board of trustees the understanding and knowledge of the community regarding issues that may be coming before it that day. And it really has allowed them to take that into consideration if they like, the issues that are going to be discussed. But the most important change that we made was adding faculty and staff liaisons to our educational personnel and student life committee. So effective August of 2022, we now have 2 CCB employees and 2 Vermont State University employees who serve on what we call the EPSL committee. They serve in an ex officio capacity, meaning they don't have any voting rights, but they do receive all of the materials and projected topics in advance. They are expected to solicit input from their fellow faculty and staff and to carry the information back. And they're also really expected to fully participate in those committee meetings, offering critical input to the board of trustees and the committee as they consider their work.
May I ask,
Yes.
are they elected by faculty and staff? Like, how does that
So
happen?
up to this point, they are appointed by the president. I will say that they generally are coming. Right now, for example, the faculty representative from Vermont State University is the president of the faculty assembly. And so while they have been appointed by the president, they are individuals who have a really strong voice within the faculty and the staff. So I also want to take a quick moment to just note that the chancellor, president, and senior staff do not serve on the board of trustees in any capacity. They are not ex officio and voting members. Instead, they're considered staff to the corporation and staff to the board. The chancellor herself is the chief administrator officer of the corporation. She's the agent of the board of trustees in implementing its decisions and policies, and really has a general supervision of the academic, financial, and business affairs of the corporation as a whole. The presidents are then the chief executives of their specific institutions. They have the responsibility for the selection of their own staff and also the implementation of policies in working with the chancellor. the selection of the presidents rests with the Board of Trustees. But the presidents themselves are responsible and report to the chancellor. And they really make sure that the chancellor is making sure that they're following the policies and practices of the system.
Do we have a copy of that, testimony?
This testimony?
Can you send it to us?
I certainly could, if you'd like.
I'd like, and do the, we only have one president,
We have two presidents,
okay?
the president of Vermont State
Right.
University and the president of Community College of Vermont. So there are two separate institutions. Vermont State University has about 45% of the total number of students enrolled in the Vermont State colleges. And the Community College of Vermont has about 55% of the students enrolled. When we look at full-time equivalency, however, the community college is about 38% of the full-time equivalents, and the remainder rests with Vermont State University.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, thanks.
The faculty and staff that are serving on committees, how's that? Can you tell us, are people showing up? Is it feeling, because I realize faculty and staff have a lot of pressure on them also.
Absolutely. So we've had an excellent participation.
Great.
Particularly from the community college. And since the start of this academic year, we've had a very excellent participation from both faculty and staff at Vermont State University, which is very helpful.
Do you have any sense how they then distribute information to their colleagues?
I do not,
Okay.
unfortunately. I do not.
May I interrupt, please?
But it's very beneficial. We've been,
Great.
obviously we're only 18 months in, but we really are finding that it's very helpful to have those voices at the table, who can participate fully with the committee. So we've really taken seriously the need for increased transparency and openness as part of the Vermont State Colleges, especially since 2020. And honestly, in my 20 years that I've been with this system, I have been really amazed at the significant increase in participation. For example, our YouTube videos are hitting more than 150 views per meeting. Putting that into context, I used to attend every committee meeting and every board meeting when I worked at the colleges, and because I was required to attend. And typically we would have, we would be lucky at a committee meeting to have 5 or 6 people in attendance. And for a board meeting, if it was held at a campus, you'd be lucky if you saw 20 to 30. But if it was held at the system office, we would be again lucky to see less than 10 people present for one of those meetings.
So since you brought that back up again, thanks for bringing that up. What is the rationale behind removing the recordings of the meetings when the minutes will come up for the next one? Instead of sort of keeping a big, sort of in perpetuity, just keeping a big collection of videos for folks to watch.
So the challenge with the meetings, the information in perpetuity is that the board, as it continues its conversation, may make different decisions or may make ultimate decisions that differ from where they were before. So the minutes are the report record. They are where the actions have occurred, the resolutions, the decisions, and the outcomes, the action items. The recording is a recording of the conversation, and we're offering it as an opportunity for individuals to be able to be up to date, but it's really the next meeting that's important. Now, I do believe that we are making some changes to extend the availability of those for a little bit longer, but I would need to go back and look at what that specifically looks like. Those are kind of the background in terms of the way that our board is comprised and how we organize that particular set of work. It is a relatively small board at 50 people, and it's been, we have made changes to the board composition in 2017. For example, this body implemented a change to reduce the number of legislative trustees from 6 to the 4 that we have today. That has just recently been fully implemented within the last 2 years, because we needed to do that over time as terms expired.
Please.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No.
I just wanted to get into the queue.
Yeah. You're right.
So at any point, did you evaluate the benefit of having a staff member, faculty member as a member of the board? You said you have the opportunity to reduce the number of legislators. Did you also then look at the benefit of those two additions?
At that time, I don't believe that we looked at that. I do know that we have had testimony before this body in 2022 about board in opposition.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from Scott?
Yeah, please. Just a general question, might be for the committee, but regarding S-238, what's the origin for this bill? I see that Senator Western introduced it, but did he introduce it in this committee? Like where?
He did, and as I recall, please correct me if I'm wrong, he was just looking for more voices on the board. And that was, came into this, but I know he'd be happy to talk to you. Please.
Just personal view. I viewed it as a less dramatic request to modify BTSU's board and leadership and such. Maybe something more palatable. That's just one perspective.
It was a component of the S-216 that,
That you, if the board wanted to enlarge itself, does that take legislative action? Or could you add perpetuating trustees? Do you know?
I believe it takes legislative action. I do want to double check that, but I believe it does. Because that is what occurred when we went through the legislation to reduce the number of legislatively elected trustees.
Any other questions for Ms. Scott? We'll hear from our ledge council to answer answers. So you've been there 20 years.
20 years. 20 years.
So you are 1/3 of your way through the contract. That's.
1/3 of my way through, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Oh, I appreciate it. That consistency is important for sure.
And
So
so-
thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate that. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thank you for your willingness to commit. St. James. You could, I think we've heard maybe a couple of the questions. You have a document here, a little bit of a summary from what we've heard, but you would mind taking us through it, just so we have some background. What's in statute and should we have some questions? So welcome and it's nice to see you.
Thank you, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. It's always nice to be with you, as I am every day. But it's always nice. So I did not have the benefit, other than sitting here and listening to the testimony. I was in another committee. So my direction for today was to kind of take you through just kind of both State Board and the Vermont State Colleges Corporation, just their makeup and how those people are appointed, et cetera. And I added a little bit of some of the legislative history here, and the policy behind it, which is kind of the times of when things changed. So if that's what you'd like to do.
Definitely,
Fully
yeah,
prepared.
so we're just starting with the Vermont State Colleges. We haven't done the shift yet to the
Okay.
State Board. We haven't had any testimony there, so starting with the Vermont State Colleges, that would be great.
Great, so you should have a handout that is just some very basic bullet points, but there is a hot link to the statute. So if you'd like me to share my screen, I'm happy to do that, otherwise we can just go through. Okay.
Got it, thanks.
So it sounds like you all heard a little bit, probably a lot of it, about the makeup of the State College Corporation Board of Trustees, but it's 15 people.
Mhm.
5 of those trustees are appointed by the governor with the advice and consent of the Senate. There's 1 student trustee, 4 trustees are elected by the legislature. So legislative trustees, 4 trustees are elected by the Board of Trustees. I believe those are generally referred to as self-perpetuating. And then the governor is a trustee. They're 4-year terms, there's no term limit. There is a requirement that appointments be made with consideration of the geographic distribution of members. And trustees cannot be members also of the Board of Trustees of UVM.
So just, sorry, so no term limits on the State Board?
Correct.
Okay.
But you can see by some of the bullet points under some of those numbers, when all of those positions were added. So the Board of Trustees started as, with, 9 governor appointed trustees. That went down to 5 5 governor appointed trustees in 2015. The student trustee was added in 1978. The 4 trustees elected by the legislative trustees were added in 1978. The self-perpetuating trustees were added in 2015, and the governor's always been a member, but he was he or she was ex officio and non-voting until 1978. And they originally started with 6-year term limits, and that was taken down to, I'm sorry, not term limit. 6-year terms, and that was taken down to 4-year terms in 2015, but there was no, can't find evidence of any term limit ever. So the makeup has changed relatively recently, 2015, I think that's pretty recent in the grand scheme of things, but that's just, there's, without going back and sorting through papers at the Secretary of State's office from 1978 and beyond, the policy behind these numbers is going to be hard to find today. But you can see kind of how long some of these positions have been there. And there's more to it. There's more to the statute. But this is kind of, we're talking mechanics.
And so my question was, does it take legislative action? It definitely takes legislative action to add any. We wanted 5 more self-perpetuating legislative action.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. St. James or committee discussion on what you'd like to do as it relates to this topic, which is, we have bills in regarding the state board. I think the 2 of you have a bill in around makeup of the board of trustees. We know Senator Westman also has a bill in around makeup of board of trustees. Do you have a bill in on makeup of the trustee board for state colleges? No, okay. But we have at least 2. So, what you've heard, some background, do you want to continue the conversation? Do you want the chancellor to come in and talk about whether the state board supports it? Want to continue this, or is this sort of, what are your feelings around this issue? I mean, it can be any, you could say, I'm happy with it now, I'd like to continue the conversation. All sorts of dissolve, getting rid of the legislative trustees, just a little conversation, please, yeah.
So I'd be very curious to see what BTSU, what feedback they have for the board membership. Leave it at that. Curious.
So when the chancellor's back.
It doesn't have to be the chancellor. Yeah,
Oh,
it
yeah.
can be the chancellor's rep. You
Yeah.
know, it's all good.
So, and that could even be a suspected board member that might be what's floating in these halls. So, we'll have somebody, we'll have their position on this. If we're going to move in this direction, if the committee's interested, it would be interesting to hear from perhaps the faculty or staff member that's serving ex officio on some of these trustees, some of these boards. Does that make sense? Looking at, okay, so in terms of who we might be wanting to talk to, just to get a sense of how's it going? Do you feel your voice is being heard? Do you, all that kind of thing?
And you mean the members of the committees that we
On the
spoke about?
committees, yeah.
Also being that the board chairman's a legislator, that might be approved for testifies.
And is that still the case? Is the chair still representative?
Representative Dickinson, yes, yeah, she'd be happy to speak to you all.
Just to have a, pros and cons.
Yeah, please, Senator.
I'm thinking, I'm on a school board and I wouldn't be allowed to be on that school board if I worked for the district. But I'm an elected official. All these board members aren't publicly elected, they're. Right, correct, I'm looking for.
Well, so the legislative appointees are elected by the legislature, but the people are electing. The voters are electing folks to the legislature who then are self-selecting their own legislative representatives, so. Kind of some layers there,
That's true.
and the governor is a member who is elected.
Do you mind repeating the question? Or were you saying the school board, if you were a faculty member there, you could be on the board?
So I, as in terms of, I'm on a school board.
Right.
I can't be employed by that district and be on that school board, as far as I know, that's what I've been told.
Okay.
I've been employed by a different district and
You
I've
could
been
be.
on a school board.
Okay.
So I guess this is something I'd like to talk about more, because on the one hand, I like a shared governance model. I think part of me thinks it would be good to have a faculty member and a staff member on these boards. On the other hand, there's obviously a clear conflict of interest, especially when you're negotiating contracts, things like that. So, I mean, I guess I would
No, I appreciate
benefit
this.
from
Yeah,
more of
yeah.
a discussion. Maybe.
Ms. Koenig has her hand up. Do you want, no, you don't.
I was
Okay.
just gonna point out the conflict of interest piece.
Others, what do you think about that
I'm
issue?
good with it the way it is. Wait for it.
The way that
Bill.
this is, or the way the bill is
Way the
written,
bill.
you like the idea of faculty or staff member on the board.
Right.
And Senator Hewitt's concern doesn't concern you as much.
Would they recuse themselves during negotiations?
Policy question, I don't know.
Yeah. That's right, I'm asking.
As with everything we do, this is one of my favorite lines. I don't think anyone likes it except me. It's all made up, right? The laws are all made up. You're making them up as you go, right? Conflict of interest is defined. Like my conflict of interest as a lawyer is defined differently in the state of Vermont. I'm also barred in Oregon. The conflicts are two separate beasts, right? Oregon has much stricter conflicts of interest laws than Vermont does. So it, that's gonna be a policy question for you all to tackle. And I can provide legal guidance when it's legal guidance, but a lot of it is going to be policy.
Right, well, that's why I directed the question at you, Senator, because if you're in favor of the bill the way it's written, how would you proceed with negotiating your own contract? I mean, are you okay with that, or you are, okay?
I think for the conflict of interest piece, at least. The focus should be on whether or not, in my opinion, that somebody is going to. Individually benefit from whatever is being worked on the board, so. If a faculty member is representing all of the faculty saying, I don't know, we need better health insurance. They may benefit, but so too will their entire constituency. But if they're then arguing, but on the other hand, if they're saying, please create this new position because I plan on applying for it, I'm gonna be a yes vote on creating this new position, and that would be, in my opinion, that's a conflict.
Right, or my partner needs a contract with state colleges to renovate a building. Yeah. that would be a good one. Okay, Senator Williams.
No, I was just thinking if it's a common benefit, even though it's gonna affect them, it's like me being a veteran and voting in favor of exempting veterans pensions from income tax. It's not just me, it's for the common benefit of all veterans in the state, so. I guess, I don't know if that's an oversimplification.
It's an interesting question. It does make me think of negotiations in general, and I'm looking to Ms. Scott on this. I know if faculty and staff are members of a union, and correct me if I have this wrong, the union rep negotiate for everyone. It's not as though Professor Scott is coming down to the dean's office and saying, you've done particularly well this year, we're gonna give you 15%, where Professor Campion, we're gonna, lower his salary. I mean,
Correct.
if everybody goes up or everybody goes down.
Correct. The layman's term is we can't direct deal with individual employees.
But only the bargaining unit can negotiate on behalf of the employees, writ large, and also on behalf of an individual.
Which is important to consider. So even in Senator Gulick's example, if a faculty member, Professor Smith, is on the board, Professor Smith's contract, as long as Professor Smith's part of the union, is never individual. It's always part of the collective, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I think of Star Trek, I think of the collective. And I'm probably doing Trekkie. I don't know, Trekkie. Straight there. Great. Any other questions? So unless I see, I think, I'm a little, I'm going into this a little bit concerned, maybe at least one other person, but it sounds like the majority of the committee wants to move forward, hear the state board's position, and go from there.
I'd like to hear the state board's position,
Yeah,
not necessarily move forward until after hearing their position.
Right.
For the,
got it.
just to clarify.
Okay. Thank you all. Do you mind if we stay here and shift gears though to another board, State Board of Education? And you have some information for us. Thank you for putting this in. So this is helping us to understand the makeup of the State Board of Education. There's a bill before us that Senator Gulick has that would divide up the appointment power of the state board to. Fair. I don't want to say. Thanks.
Again, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. Yes, I believe, let's see, what is it? S-203 keeps the number of state board members the same,
Which is how many?
the 10.
10, there it is.
So currently, all of the state board members are governor appointees.
Right.
S-203 would split that up between the governor and the legislature, but within the legislature, House and Senate. So it wouldn't be a joint assembly, it would be two different bodies. And S-203 adds qualifications to each seat on the board. There has to be representation in several different areas of the education world. So if we look at my handout, current law, 10 members, 2 members are high school students, and the way it works is you're appointed as a junior and you are a non-voting member. And then you go on and serve in your senior year and you become a full voting member. So there's always 2. And theoretically, once you're appointed your junior year, you're serving 2 years. There are 8 non-student members. Everyone's appointed by the governor with the advice and consent of the Senate. The student members were added in 2000. And in 2000, the board went from 7 members total to 10 members total. So that was adding the 2 student members and adding 1 non-student member. I don't want to say grown-up member. So we'll just say non-student. There is language in statute that requires priority to be given to people with a demonstrated commitment to ensuring quality education for Vermont students. That language is added in 2012. There is also a requirement that to the extent possible, the members shall represent the state's geographic, gender, racial, and ethnic diversity. That language, gender, racial, and ethnic diversity, was added in 2021. There was reference to geographic diversity going back many years. A little bit different phrasing, but it was there. The secretary serves as a non-voting member, so he does not count towards top 10. Or she. The state board has 6-year terms, and they are limited to 1 term, so there's no reappointment option. And that's it. That's all that. There's more to the statute, but for who's on it and the qualifications. This is the basic.
Does the bill, in any way talk about how people might apply? Or is it sort of like what we have now, where I think it all sort of, there are different ways people can put people's names forward.
Yes, so, let me just pull up current statute. Use my own hot link here. Okay. So, current statute only talks about the application process in relation to students. I'm not very good at multitasking, but, there's nothing really in current statute about, the application process, but S 203 does shake things up a little bit. So it requires, so it's 4 members, so it keeps the number as 10. It adds some, qualifications to each seat, so there needs to be representation for experience as a principal, superintendent, teacher, school board member, education preparation program provider, special education provider, and parent. So of those 10 seats, there has to be at least one person per seat representing those. So it couldn't be a parent and special education provider who also does education. It has to be, it's one role for one seat. The governor still appoints 4 members. 2 of those are students and 2 of those are non-students. That's all the bill says about it, and that's all the current law says about it. For the legislative appointments, though, what is contemplated here is both chambers, so both the Senate and the House, would be voting on appointments chosen from among not fewer than 6 candidates proposed by the committees of jurisdiction, so Senate Ed and House Ed. So Senate and House Ed would choose 6 candidates, put them forward, and then the Senate would vote for 3, and then the House would vote for 3.
So, we do all the vetting. So it's kind of come to us. The usual, we choose 3 names. So,
This committee would put forward 6 names.
Okay.
To the Senate as a whole,
okay,
and then the Senate would would appoint 3 members to the state board.
Committee on committees.
Yes, sorry,
Oh,
committee on
okay.
committees, yes, sorry,
got
I'm
it,
sorry, the committee on committees would do that.
got it, great.
And then, I'm sorry, thank you. And then it's the same in the House, only it's House Education putting forward 6 names, and then the speaker would appoint 3.
Beautiful.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Please,
Maybe a question for the
sponsor.
sponsor of the bill.
Yes.
Given that there's buckets of types of members that are anticipated, parents, for example. How do we know that the Senate Committee on Committees is going to, or the House Speaker, how are they going to adjudicate who's got the parent in their group so that there are representation across the intended scope of members?
Well, we can probably work that out, but I'm glad you brought that up, because I was actually gonna give you a nod, because you have organized us in health and welfare really well around our board appointments, which has been really helpful and makes me wonder if
So
we
you should
should,
do it for that.
yeah, it makes me wonder if we
Uh,
should sort
yeah.
of clean up our, for how we do board nominations, because, I mean, remember last year when we called folks, a lot of them had never been called before. And I ended up having great conversations with a lot of those folks, but, so I guess my sense is maybe it's up to the, okay, no, she's pointing, okay.
You've already thought of this.
It's in there.
It's I don't have this bill in front of me.
Would you like to just speak to that?
Yeah, just briefly, I mean, if it's covered, it's covered.
Well, so what, the way that this bill does it, and again, if you choose to take this up, we can do
Yeah,
whatever
sure,
you'd like.
sure.
The way this bill covers that is for, is a transition section. So, I tied every expiring term to an appointment.
Oh, good, that's great.
And so once a term expires, so for terms expiring February 28th, 2025, which I believe are the first terms that would be up if this bill were to pass. One appointment has to be made by the Senate Committee on Committees and one made by the Speaker. All of those seats are open, right? All of those positions. You would probably want to look at the composition of the state board and see, is there really a glaring hole there? Is there a special educator? And if there isn't, then maybe Senate Committee on Committees first appointment is the special educator. And then maybe the House's first appointment is a parent. Those seats are then tied to the appointing body for the life of the state, until you make further changes. So if that first seat appointment is for educator preparation programs, the Senate is always going to appoint the educator preparation program seat.
Yeah, it was nice.
Until you make changes.
Good, well
Well.
done.
Senator Hashim.
Just a general comment, I strongly support this, but I do think that if it's going to move forward, I think there should also just be a heavy focus on the qualifications piece and whether or not, well, the challenges that actually could come up. And what I'm thinking of is, for example, my hometown is, we have 2 select board seats that are open. And I'm thinking about, school boards that are, trying to almost begging people to run for board seats. And so, I'm wondering, how easy will it be to find, for example, a special educator who will have the time and bandwidth to do this? If it is viable, 100% in support, but I do think maybe just further conversation on the qualifications piece, but overall strong support of the idea of the bill.
And maybe we do add some money to it. I mean, honestly, everybody, I know we all see it as volunteer work, but maybe if people get a little bit of money, maybe it might work out for them a little bit more easily.
Especially
Perhaps.
perhaps thinking of a parent who's, working 2 jobs with a couple of kids, it's gonna be hard for a parent to find the time to really focus on this if they're taking away time from their job or their parent. So.
And I don't know where everyone else is. Someday, or I have also thought about dissolving the board, talked to Senator Dulick. So much of this responsibility does lie. I mean, the State Board of Education is staffed by the Agency of Education. They look to them for expertise, they look for them for legal advice, although they did hire some part-time attorney, I think now they've got some. But there's always talk about, I've had bills in over the years to dissolve the state board. But please.
Can we dig into a little bit more what's the mandate and the statute for the board of?
What their duties are?
Sure.
Absolutely. Do you want me to share my screen?
Please. And I don't mean it in any way as, but like, thinking that this is not a good idea, this is, just. All these things come down and oftentimes it's, gosh. State board, we have to talk the Agency of Education.
Right, and I was gonna say to Senator Hashim's point, just wanted to say that seems to be a bigger problem of sort of civic engagement generally, because people not necessarily wanting to run for boards, but also something I've seen with some boards is like providing childcare and providing some food if it's around like a mealtime, just to help sort of ease the burden for folks. So these, those are things that we could think about, but also remuneration is also a nice concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Will you let me in?
Oh, it's not just.
Sorry.
No. Sorry.
I think this one says it's scheduled for tomorrow. I may have the wrong Zoom link. Okay.
Wouldn't want to go too far down this because we have a few other things to do, but any kind of general, we have this COSIS, if we have.
I'll just show it to you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yep.
No, I think it's what I was asked for. It's,
Hey, but so less orange today, James.
sorry.
We're less orange.
Yeah, I didn't notice that. It's the-
Well, Wanda Garces be speaking about that. We're going to, right?
Speak up.
Okay. Maybe we can try one more time, and if that doesn't happen, I'll just run through it myself, but, let's try.
Yeah, anyone like to look at you on the reading?
Sure, I'll have.
Okay.
Yeah. It's the time for just go around and bring six one thing that you like about the chair. I'm sorry.
This ties.
His knowledge of French language is
Actually thinking, I wrote a few people down to come in about SGO 3. Former state board chair, and maybe even Joey Jonathan. Could be interesting. Okay, so those are
this
the
is-
responsibilities.
Yeah, this is, and there might be other responsibilities sprinkled throughout one Title 16, but this is currently what the state board is tasked with,
Okay,
which is a lot.
it's a lot, yeah. Would you mind sending that link to Morgan? And Morgan, would you print out a bunch of copies this afternoon, just so we have them, so people can take them with them and have them handy. It's a lot.
You can see there's been lots of changes over the years.
wow.
I would say the big piece, almost every rule in the education world is owned by the state board. They have historically been the adopter of the rules for education in Vermont. I think you are seeing over the last couple of years, some specific delegation of rulemaking authority to the agency.
Yeah, it's,
That was gonna be my question. So can the agency not be the arbiter of the rules?
They certainly can, you can build that in anywhere you want, but right now, the laws say that one of the state board's primary responsibilities is to adopt rules to carry out the powers and duties of the board as directed by the General Assembly. And then there's peppered throughout very specific, like, state board has to adopt CTE rules, the state board adopts rules on approval of independent schools, the state board adopts the education quality standards, right? So those big pieces are all, you could legally flip that, change that, delegate, transfer, we talked about transfer of rulemaking authority last week. You could certainly do that, but I just wanted to point out that when we talk about rules, then we're talking about state board responsibilities, that the rules live with the state board primarily.
happen to know if, for example, with transportation. Is it all the agency of transportation does rules, or if there are other rulemaking bodies? Does this mirror other?
I think it's all over the map, so I
Yeah.
can tell you that, for example, the Secretary of State's office is an umbrella agency that houses over 50 professions. And each of those professions has their own rules. So the Board of Nursing adopts their own rules. The Office of Professional Regulation, which is a part of the Secretary of State's office, provides, it's a different relationship than the Agency of Education and the State Board of Education. It is not the same relationship, but those rules are the state, the nursing board's rules, the dental board's rules. I think you're gonna see a different, you're gonna see it differently.
And my gut is pushing February first, we move forward, this is just my opinion. The committee can do whatever it really wants on this, but we focus on Senator Buick's bill as is, dissolving it, and this massive shift right now doesn't feel like we are equipped at this point to do it. But we'll jump in and have some witnesses in on S-203 next week unless I'm seeing no concern with that. Great. St. James, thank you so much. I know you're coming back in momentarily, but I'm going to switch to have Amanda Garces here to say a few words about about S-203 specifically. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break and then we're going to go to curriculum support.
I think you could get a little more room up there.
Garces.
Thank you so much. For the record, my name is Amanda Garces. I am Director of Policy, Education, and Outreach for the Vermont Human Rights Commission. And I am very happy to be here today with you. And I prepared something.
Please, yep, wonderful. Does Morgan have it?
No,
Okay,
but I can.
great, you can send it to her. Thank you
as-
both.
Thanks for having.
As you are aware, our mission at the Human Rights Commission is to promote full civil and human rights in Vermont, and we advocate for policies and legislation that protect the most vulnerable Vermonters. I really appreciate the invitation to this conversation. As the former Act One Working Group Chair, I want to express my concerns and advocate for the diversification of the State Board of Education, while recognizing the importance of all the voices. I emphasize primary focus should remain on ensuring high quality education for all students, irrespective of their educational institution. The state board responsibilities, including regulating attendance, student performance standards, adult basic education program, approval of independent schools, disbursement of funds, and ensuring equal access to quality education, directly impact students' lives. Therefore, the board's composition should reflect a comprehensive understanding of the diverse challenges and opportunities faced by students across all of our educational settings. I would like to share my experience with the current state board in relation to the Act One Working Group process. In 2019, this legislative body unanimously passed Act One, establishing the Ethnic and Social Equity Working Group. This initiative brought together 23 individuals, including 12 members representing various ethnic and social groups, 4 high school students, a Vermont faculty member from the college level faculty member, the current interim secretary of education, the NEA, executive director of racial equity, the Vermont School Board Association, the Principals Association, Curriculum Leaders Association, independent schools, and our office, the Human Rights Commission. This inclusive collaboration aimed to address critical issues related to ethnic and social equity within Vermont's educational landscape. It was a direct response to multiple reports and the reality of racism in our Vermont schools and curriculum, which has been highlighted since 1999. Over a meticulous 4-year period, our working group developed substantial effort to advance in our mission, resulting in a document that you saw that reflected consensus in virtually every aspect except one crucial point. The majority of our working group, comprised of 23 members, voted to ensure that independent schools receiving public funding adhere to the education quality standards. One member representing an independent school opposed this provision while expressing 0 objections to the remainder of the document. And I want to say that we had an excellent 2 of the members. It was the transition in that for the independent school. They made beautiful contributions to our work. Julie Hansen was the second, and I forgot the first person's name because she was there shortly, but both gave us amazing contributions to our document. Our collective efforts culminated in the approval of the EQS on April 14, 2022. This document stands as a testament to our inclusive, well-researched, holistic approach to address the diverse needs of our education system. Subsequently, the state board initiated a subcommittee as to the insurance compliance. This subcommittee actively sought public input, collaborated with our working group to incorporate changes and extensive documentation they received, outlining the resources and our research. Although numerous modifications were made through this process, the final versions removed in the independent schools from the EQS, and the rationale provided was rooted in the statutory framework that says that they do not apply to independent schools unless they actively seek designation meeting the EQS criteria, which some Vermont independent schools say that they would like to
So you're saying
comply.
the state board did not act within its legal abilities?
No, they did.
Okay, I just want to make sure,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
that's important to know.
Yes, yes. So, so the state board voted to remove it with the rationale that
Okay.
the framework, that's not the
Got it.
framework. And then they communicated that to revisit the series 2200, which is the independent school approval rule. Following that decision, the state board voted on the EQS on May 17, 2023. And it entered ICAR process, which was approved on June 12, 2023. Then significant public comments were received from, and this is what happens in the rulemaking process, ICAR, public comment period, and then it goes to LCAR, right? Before it gets a final vote from the state board. In that public comment period, they hire a new attorney that then open, and then they reopen the 2200 series, which is.
When you say that, you mean the
The
state board?
state board, yes. So the state board hired one independent counsel for the EQS that saw no problems with the language that existed. Then they reopened the 2200 rules, and I'm sure you will have them to explain their, that this is from our perspective of what we have seen. They reopened the rule, and then the EQS were already having their public comment period. They got a lot of people in the field, educators. Remember, our work was voted by a lot of public comment too. We had a lot of public comment. EQS subcommittee had a lot of public comment. It went through ICAR, then reopened more public comment.
Okay, yeah,
So it had a lot of public
Yeah.
comment. In this period, it was the same time that the independent school was open. And they started having issues with our discrimination definition.
the state
And
board,
the state board with the new attorney, now had problems. And then they started to look back at our EQS. And even though the public comment was about 2 days to be closed, then there was a document that said we might change the EQS. So they had already gone through this process. That's where we're at. So now they're making changes to the EQS that did not include any of the public comment. Nobody said that they had a problem.
Now they are, right now.
Now they are saying that there is a problem with the definition. None of the public has said that they want to protect students, right? Like specifically really amplify that the students are the ones that need to be protected. There's no real legal analysis that I have seen or that we have seen that says, here's how it is. It is more broader, like these might be, this might have, but not really a legal analysis from what we can see. So that's where we are right now with that. And the proposed substantial changes, let me just move on for you. So this detailed timeline underscores the intricacies of the development and surrounded efforts, highlighting both the collaborative process that we had with the EQS subcommittee, which was really, really good. We went back and forth. We did more research, gave them like 30-page papers of all the rationale for all the research that we did. And so we thought that was a really good process. To be clear, I support the idea of including representatives from independent schools in the state board, but it is crucial that the inclusion serves the broader purpose of prioritizing students' well-being and educational outcomes. The conversation within the board should center on the overarching goal of providing excellent education for all students, rather than becoming primarily concerned with regulating regulations specific to independent schools. And I really urge you to consider the composition that ensuring that is diverse and representatives of various perspectives with an unwavering commitment to prioritizing the well-being and protection of the student. By doing so, the board can effectively address the unique needs of our student population that is growing more and more and work towards policies to promote high quality education. That's what I have. And so I have,
Yeah, no, I think the state board, I can't get in the middle of a disagreement. Clearly, there's a disagreement between the state board and the working group. Clear. We can't
yeah,
navigate that.
exactly.
It's just really hard. But I think my takeaway is you support this reworking of the boards for more diversity, more, I don't know, more balance,
Yeah.
more appointment, kind of shift.
More transparency, I think that's really, I'm not here, the disagreement
Right,
is,
I know.
it is what it is. And it's going to be what it is, and it's really sad to see that the discrimination conversation has polarized, really, is the polarization between we're going to create a protection for our students in public school, which is about, 90,000 students versus the 4% in independent schools have a different sense of discrimination. So that's what it is. And, maybe the legislature in a couple of years will look at what discrimination looks like in our schools. But for this purpose, I think it's the transparency of processes that have happened. It is also how we are really thinking and centering the students, which is why I think it's really important. I sit on the standards board, which regulates the license. That board is beautiful. It's mostly teachers, right? Like they're
Unlicensed.
on the
Yeah.
licensing board, like mostly teachers, the superintendent. I have the school board seat because I was at the school board, but June my term ends because I'm no longer at the school board. But I think it really does create a very different approach when you are centering what you're supposed to be there for, right? Like when you're centering the students, when you're really thinking about and I don't know what the answer is when you have this polarization conversation, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's like you're supposed to be here to protect the students. Who else
Yeah.
is protecting?
Yeah, Senator do it.
A few things. First, it'd be great, aside from this bill, to have the board come in and speak to this disagreement, because now I'm very curious about it. I don't know much about it, but I'm really curious. And it just piques my interest that one group of kids is beholden to one set of rules and another group of kids is beholden to a separate. I don't understand it. It is very.
And it might be a
Vaccine.
alleged council question, because I
Okay,
think what you're
yeah.
all disagreeing on is your legal authority and who had this and who exceeded I think that's my gut.
And so to be fair, so what they're doing is aligning.
Okay.
So they're saying, this doesn't belong here, so we're gonna align the standards, but when they're aligning two different rules. To ensure that they're aligned, what they're doing is saying, well, we can't really make these independent schools have that much of protection, so we're just gonna lower the public school.
Fascinating.
So it's the alignment that they're trying to do, so like, it's
Fascinating.
not wrong what they're
Okay.
doing,
So
right? It's not
interesting.
wrong.
Okay, that's important.
Yeah, it's not
Because-
wrong
so
that they're
it's-
trying to align it, but what is wrong is like we have built this protection here
Got it.
for our students in our public school system. And to be able to align it, now we're gonna have to lower it. It shouldn't be like that, we should be.
Right.
So your disagreement is with the decision, not the legal authority that everybody had.
Yeah.
Correct, I'm just trying to
So,
figure it out
Yeah,
a little
so,
bit.
Yeah.
and then my other question for you, which is related to this bill, is, I don't know if you've taken a look at it, but do you, does it help, do you think we can get more representation with a different appointment model?
I think so. And I think, I've been listening to conversation before, I think there are lots of educators. You see the standards board, they're all educators. There are teachers in classrooms that are there one full day, they're in committees, they do work. And they have a high level of really like standards, like the decisions that they make are always like things like, we don't wanna lower standards, like we are. So I think there is a lot of people that want to serve, and it's like
Yeah,
how those decisions are made and how transparent you make the process for people to apply.
And I like having the Senate and the House having a say, because it's not everyone's gonna naturally gravitate toward this work. And one of the things when I did emerge that we learned was that a woman has to be asked 8 times to run for office before she actually runs. And I mean, that's the kind of thing, like you need to bring people in. And I like that we might get more of a diversity of voices and choices with that.
Men too. That affects
Oh, really?
Yep.
Okay, that's not what we were told.
the world
They were asked
different way.
once and they ran,
No,
or they woke up in the morning and decided.
interesting. Senator Sheen.
Anyways, I had just a comment. Generally speaking, I think that, thank you for your testimony, by the way. I think, one of the reasons that I'm a supporter of this is it's trying to look more at the long term and the bigger picture of education. I mean, to see that we have a state board in which all of the members are appointed by the governor for such a vast and important part of our part of society in our state. I don't think that really makes sense to me. I also think that to sort of spread it out between the two branches, I think also creates a bit more of a balance and protection for, I mean, who knows who the governor is going to be 10 years from now, or what their goals might be for education in Vermont. And so I think diversifying it in this way is an important step to take.
Yeah, and it's nothing that we've looked seriously at in this way, I think, in a long time, or perhaps never, there's talk of it, but this is, but I think this is the first time, and I think the point's a good one. Even though the governor does appoint judges, and does appoint a lot of things, this is very different, I think. Yes, please.
Sorry, I didn't, judicial nominating, that does go
Yes, yeah.
through our board, which
Yeah.
also has a few legislators on it.
And this will go through a board, but it just won't be the governor like judges do. Yeah. Great.
And I think just learning from what we learned in Act One, that it can happen. That you could bring the voices of the people in line with the voices of the institution and still work together to create something that is meaningful for our students. It's
Yeah, I
really hard,
agree.
so I think it can happen. I think it's possible. And I think there's a lot of people in this state that is, really committed to students, to protections, to like really thinking and about this stuff.
I would still argue that we might have put some money behind it. And I think we've had this conversation in this committee over the years where to do this, it's a big job. And if you're sitting at home or at work, and you've got all these other things going on. Yeah, it's hard. Anyhow. Any final questions from Ms. Garces before we take a 5-minute break? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank
you'll
you.
email that too?
Yes, I will email.
Great.
Thank you so much.
And I think